We've explored the storm drains beneath our casinos and the buried streets beneath our cities. But there is a third kind of subterranean world. One built not for water or for commerce, but for the end of the world. Welcome to video 3 of our Subterranean World series. Tonight, we are cracking open the heavy blast doors of the Cold War. Across America and Europe, thousands of nuclear silos, fallout shelters, and military bunkers sit abandoned. They are monuments to paranoia. Concrete tombs designed to survive atomic fire. Structures engineered to withstand pressures that would vaporize cities. But while the nuclear war never came, a different kind of darkness moved in. Killers, kidnappers, drug lords. They realized that a structure designed to keep radiation out is also perfect for keeping victims in. Walls thick enough to stop gamma rays also stop screams. Blast doors that seal against shockwaves also seal against escape. From the survivalist who built a fortress for murder to the CyberBunker that hosted the dark web, tonight we descend into 7 stories from the concrete tomb. Places where the Cold War's architecture of fear became the infrastructure of horror. These are the crimes of the Doomsday Underground. Let's go down. The Mountain Fortress, Rattlesnake Ridge, Washington, April 22nd, 2012. The call comes in at 7:43 in the morning. A house fire in North Bend, a small town about 30 miles east of Seattle, nestled in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. It's a quiet Sunday morning. Neighbors see smoke pouring from the Keller residence and call 911. Firefighters respond within minutes. By the time they arrive, the house is fully engulfed. Flames are shooting through the roof. The windows have blown out from the heat. Black smoke billows into the clear spring sky. They fight the fire for 3 hours before it's safe to enter. The structure is badly damaged. The roof has collapsed into the 2nd floor. The walls are charred. Everything smells like gasoline. And that's the first red flag. This fire was accelerated. Inside, firefighters make a grim discovery. 2 bodies. A woman in the master bedroom. A young woman in a bedroom down the hall. Both lying in their beds. Both with gunshot wounds to the head. This isn't a house fire. This is a double homicide. The victims are identified quickly through dental records. Lynette Keller, 41 years old, and her daughter, Kayleen Keller, 18 tower. Mother and daughter, both shot execution style while they slept. They lived in this house with Lynette's husband and Kayleen's stepfather, Peter Keller. Peter is 41 years old, and it's specialist for a software company in Seattle. He's worked there for over a decade. By all accounts, he's competent, quiet, keeps to himself. Colleagues describe him as polite but distant. He never talks about his personal life. But Peter is missing. His car, a silver Toyota Yaris, is gone from the driveway. His computer is missing from his home office. And, according to his employer, he hasn't shown up for work since Friday, 2 days before the fire. Police issue a bolo, be on the lookout, for Peter and his vehicle. They check his bank accounts. No activity since Friday morning, when he withdrew $500 in cash from an ATM. His credit cards haven't been used. His cell phone is off. He's vanished. Detectives begin building a timeline. According to neighbors, everything seemed normal at the Keller house on Friday evening. Lights were on. Cars were in the driveway. No sounds of arguing or disturbance. Saturday morning, neighbors noticed Peter's car was gone. They assumed he was running errands. By Saturday evening, the house was dark, quieted. Sunday morning, it was on fire. Investigators start digging into Peter's background, looking for any indication of where he might have gone. They subpoena his financial records. And that's when things get strange. Over the past 8 years, Peter had been making unusual purchases. Survivalist supplies, weapons, ammunition, freeze-dried food, water purification tablets, camping gear, tactical equipment, generators, solar panels. The purchases were spread across dozens of different retailers, paid for in cash or with prepaid debit cards, clearly designed to avoid creating a pattern. But when you add it all up, it's staggering. Over $30,000 worth of supplies. And here's the question investigators can't answer. Where is it all? Peter's house is small, maybe 1,500 square feet. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small garage. Detectives search every inch of the property. No stockpile, no arsenal, no cache of food. The garage has normal tools, a lawnmower, some hand tools, a workbench. Nothing unusual. So where did everything go? They check storage units within a 50-mile radius. Nothing registered in Peter's name or his wife's name. They check property records. Peter doesn't own any other land. But then a detective named Katie Larson notices something in Peter's computer files, recovered from a backup drive at his workplace. Peter had been obsessively researching survivalist forums for years. End-of-the-world scenarios, societal collapse, how to live off the grid. And one topic kept coming up: how to build hidden fortifications, how to create a tactical position in the wilderness, how to construct a bunker that couldn't be detected from the air. Peter had downloaded dozens of PDFs, military field manuals, engineering guides, camouflage techniques. He'd been studying this like it was a graduate program. Detective Larson digs deeper into Peter's browser history, and she finds a pattern. Peter had been repeatedly searching satellite imagery of one specific area, Rattlesnake Ridge, a densely forested area about 10 miles southeast of North Bend. It's public land, part of the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. Thousands of acres of Douglas fir, western hemlock, and cedar. Steep terrain, rocky outcroppings, deep ravines, popular with hikers in the summer, but mostly empty. Larson pulls up current satellite imagery of the ridge. She scans the area Peter had been viewing. Nothing, just trees, dense canopy. Then she gets an idea. She accesses historical satellite images, going back years, looking for changes, disturbances in the forest. And there it is, a faint trail, barely visible through the canopy, leading from a Forest Service road up into the ridge. The trail doesn't appear on any hiking maps. It's not maintained by the Park Service. It's Peter's. Larson brings this to her lieutenant. They make a decision. They're going in. On April 25th, 3 days after the bodies are found, a tactical team assembles at the Forest Service road. 20 officers, King County Sheriff's SWAT, armed with rifles and sidearms, moving slowly through the dense timber. They know Peter is dangerous. His credit card records show he purchased multiple firearms over the years, including a Ruger Mini 14 rifle and a Remington 700 bolt action. Both are precision weapons, good for long-range shooting. And based on his online activity, Peter had been training. He joined a shooting club, practiced regularly at ranges, posted on forums about long-range accuracy and tactical shooting positions. He'd been preparing for exactly this scenario, a last stand. The team moves carefully through the forest. It's late April. The weather is cool and damp. Mist hangs in the air, clinging to the pine needles. Visibility is limited, maybe 50 feet in any direction. Every shadow could be him. Every sound could be a rifle bolt. They follow the trail. It's narrow, maybe 18 inches wide, winding uphill through the trees. Whoever made this path knew what they were doing. It avoids clearings. It uses natural cover, thick brush, fallen logs, rock formations. It would be almost impossible to spot from the air. The trail climbs for over a mile. The team moves in formation. 2 officers in front with ballistic shields. The rest spread out behind them. They're watching for tripwires, for camouflaged positions, for anything that looks wrong. Then the point man raises his fist. Stop. He's seen something. A section of the forest floor that looks slightly off. The moss is too uniform, too perfect. The team approaches slowly. One of the officers kneels down and brushes away some debris. Pine needles, small branches, leaves. Underneath is a wooden hatch, maybe 3 feet by 4 feet, reinforced with metal brackets. There's a lock on the inside. They can see the mechanism through a small gap. This is it. The tactical commander, Sergeant Mike Thompson, calls out. Peter Keller, this is the King County Sheriff's Office. We know you're in there. Come out with your hands up. This is your only warning? Silence, and the forest is completely still. No response. Thompson waits. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Nothing. He makes the decision. Breach. One of the officers, a demolition specialist, approaches the hatch carefully. He attaches a small frame charge to the lock mechanism. The team pulls back behind trees and rocks. Fire in the hole. The charge detonates. The explosion is sharp and loud, echoing through the forest. Birds scatter from the trees. The sound carries for miles. Smoke pours from the hatch. The team moves in immediately, weapons raised. They pull the hatch open. Below is darkness. The tactical lights cut through the smoke, illuminating a ladder descending into the earth. Covering. 2 officers descend, their rifles sweeping the space below. Clear. The rest of the team follows. What they find is staggering. Peter Keller had built a bunker, not a crude hole in the ground. A sophisticated, multi-level fortified position. The main chamber is roughly 10 feet by 12 feet. The walls are lined with plywood, sealed with tar paper to prevent moisture. The ceiling is supported by 6 by 6 timber beams, reinforced with metal brackets. The floor is plywood over packed earth, and the space is packed with supplies. Shelves line 3 walls, floor to ceiling. Canned food, hundreds of cans. Soup, vegetables, beans, fruits, bottled water, cases stacked in the corner. Medical supplies, bandages, antibiotics, pain medication. Batteries, dozens of packages. Radios, both handheld and base station. Flashlights, lanterns, propane stoves, fuel canisters, and weapons. Multiple rifles leaning against the far wall. A Ruger Mini 14, a Remington 700, an AR-15 style rifle, 2 shotguns, 3 handguns, and ammunition. Thousands of rounds stored in military-grade ammo cans. 9mm, 5.56, 7.62, 12 gauge. The team does a quick inventory. There's enough food here to last 6 months. Enough ammunition to fight a small war. But that's not all. Officer Dan Vargas notices a ladder in the corner, leading down. There's a second level. Vargas descends carefully, his rifle light cutting through the darkness below. The lower chamber is smaller, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, and it's even more fortified. The walls are reinforced with sandbags, dozens of them, stacked floor to ceiling. There are firing ports, small openings cut into the wood and sandbags, angled to cover different directions. You could shoot through these ports while remaining completely protected. This isn't a shelter. This is a fighting position. Vargas realizes what Peter had built. This bunker was designed for a siege. The upper level was living quarters and storage. The lower level was a defensive position. If someone tried to breach the upper chamber, Peter could retreat to the lower level and hold them off indefinitely. The ammunition alone could sustain a firefight for hours. But Peter isn't here. The bunker is empty. Well, not empty. There's evidence he was here recently. A sleeping bag is laid out on a cot in the upper chamber. It's still warm to the touch. Food wrappers on the floor. Protein bar wrappers. Dated from yesterday. A battery-powered lantern is still on, casting a dim glow. He was here. Recently. Maybe within the last few hours. Thompson makes the call. They're expanding the search. If Peter built one bunker, he might have built others. Backup positions. Escape routes. The team exits the main bunker and spreads out through the surrounding forest, moving in a grid pattern. They search for 2 hours. Then Officer Chris Martinez finds something. Another structure. About 200 yards northeast of the main bunker, hidden in a deep ravine. This one is cruder. Just a covered pit. A sheet of plywood camouflaged with moss and branches, covering a hole roughly 6 feet deep and 4 feet wide. There are supplies here too. A backpack with food and water. A rifle. Ammunition. And Peter. He's lying at the bottom of the pit. Dead. A single gunshot wound to the head. The rifle is lying across his lap. A Remington 700. The barrel is in his mouth. His finger is still on the trigger. Self-inflicted. There's a handwritten note pinned to his chest with a safety pin. The note is written on a piece of notebook paper, folded once. Thompson unfolds it carefully. The handwriting is neat, steady. not the frantic scrawl of someone in a panic. It reads, "I couldn't live with what I did. I'm sorry." That's it. No explanation. No justification. Just an apology. The investigation reveals the full timeline. Over the following week, Peter Keller had been living a double life for 8 years. During the week, he was a normal IT worker. Husband. Stepfather. He went to work every day. Sat in meetings. Fixed computer problems. Came home at 5:30. Had dinner with his family. Watched TV. Went to bed. But on weekends, he disappeared. He told his wife he was hiking, or camping, or meeting friends from work. She never questioned it. She was glad he had hobbies. But Peter wasn't hiking. He was building. Every Saturday and Sunday for 8 years, Peter drove to the trailhead at Rattlesnake Ridge. He parked his car in different locations to avoid creating a pattern, and he hiked up to his construction site. One wheelbarrow load at a time, he hauled supplies up the mountain. Plywood, timber, sandbags, food, weapons, everything he needed. He dug the bunkers by hand, excavated tons of earth, reinforced the walls, built the shelves, installed the ladder, camouflaged the entrance. He tested everything. The locks, the ventilation, the firing ports. He was meticulous, and no one knew. His wife didn't know. His stepdaughter didn't know. His coworkers didn't know. For 8 years, Peter Keller was building a fortress to escape to. And on April 20th, 2012, he decided it was time. The evidence suggests Peter made his decision that Friday morning. He withdrew $500 in cash. He went to work, but he was distracted. Colleagues said he seemed distant. He left early, around 3 in the afternoon. He drove home, and that night he murdered his family. Lynette first, while she was sleeping, a single shot to the head. Then Kylene, in her bedroom, also asleep, also a single shot. He used a handgun with a suppressor, a silencer, that he built himself from parts ordered online. The shots were quiet. No one heard. Peter then methodically set the house on fire. He poured gasoline in multiple rooms. He opened the gas line on the stove, and he lit it. By the time he drove away, the house was beginning to burn. He drove to the trailhead at Rattlesnake Ridge, parked his car in a hidden spot off the Forest Service road, covered it with a camouflage tarp, and he hiked up to his bunker. He stayed there for 3 days. 3 days alone in his fortress, with his supplies, his weapons, his preparations. Waiting for what? That's what investigators couldn't figure out. Peter's journals, found in the bunker, reveal his mindset. He believed society was going to collapse. Not from nuclear war necessarily, but from economic collapse, or pandemic, or civil war. He'd been reading apocalyptic literature for years. Prepper forums, survivalist blogs. He believed the end was coming, and he wanted to be ready. But somewhere along the way, his preparation became an obsession, and the obsession became an escape plan. He didn't want to survive the apocalypse with his family. He wanted to survive alone. His wife and stepdaughter were obstacles, anchors keeping him tied to a life he didn't want to. So he eliminated them. But then, sitting in his bunker for 3 days, Peter realized something. There was no apocalypse coming. No societal collapse. No enemy to fight. Just him. Alone. In a hole in the ground. With the knowledge of what he'd done. The silence must have been deafening. No radio chatter from panicked civilians. No distant explosions. Just the sound of wind through the trees. And his own thoughts. On the 3rd day, Peter left his main bunker and walked to his backup position. The crude pit in the ravine. He climbed down, loaded his rifle, and ended it. This case remains one of the most disturbing examples of the survivalist killer archetype. Peter Keller wasn't preparing for an external threat. He was preparing to escape his own life, and he built a tomb to do it. The psychology here is crucial. Peter spent 8 years building something that was supposed to save him, but in reality, he was building a cage, a physical manifestation of his isolation. The bunkers on Rattlesnake Ridge were eventually sealed by the county. Explosives were used to collapse the entrances. Tons of earth were pushed over the site. But the structures themselves are still there, buried, waiting, a monument to paranoia and murder. You might wonder how someone could spend 8 years building something like this without anyone noticing. But that's the thing about the wilderness. It's vast, it's empty, and if you're patient, if you're careful, you can hide almost anything in it. Peter Keller proved that. He built a fortress in plain sight, and no one knew until it was too late. The Doctor's Dungeon, Kristianstad, Sweden, September 10th, 2015. A woman is reported missing. She's 27 years old. We'll call her Anna, though that's not her real name. Swedish law protects the identity of crime victims, especially in cases involving sexual violence or kidnapping. Anna lives alone in a small apartment in Kristianstad, a city of about 40,000 people in southern Sweden. It's a quiet place, safe, the kind of town where people don't lock their doors. Anna works as a receptionist at a local business. She's reliable, always on time. So when she doesn't show up for work on Monday, September 9th, her employer is concerned. By Tuesday, when she still hasn't appeared and isn't answering her phone, the employer calls the police. Officers go to Anna's apartment. The door is unlocked. That's the first strange thing. Inside, everything looks normal. The apartment is clean, tidy, dingy. No signs of struggle. No blood. No overturned furniture. No broken glass. Her phone is sitting on the kitchen counter, plugged into a charger. Her purse is on the table by the door. Her keys are hanging on a hook. Her laptop is open on the couch, still logged into her email. It looks like she just stepped out for a moment, but her coat is gone, and so is she. Police interview her neighbors. No one heard anything unusual. No shouting. No sounds of a struggle. One neighbor thought she heard Anna's door close on Sunday evening, around 8 o'clock, but didn't think anything of it. Investigators pull security footage from nearby businesses, and they find something. Anna is seen on Sunday, September 8th, at approximately 7:30 in the evening, walking down a residential street about 6 blocks from her apartment. She's alone. She's wearing jeans and the coat that's missing from her apartment. She appears to be walking with purpose, not rushing, but moving steadily. Then she turns down a driveway and disappears. The footage cuts off. The camera doesn't cover that section of the street. Police identify the property, a small farm on the outskirts of Kristianstad, red farmhouse, a barn, some outbuildings, fields. It looks peaceful, idyllic, even. The property is owned by a man named Martin Trenneborg, 53 years old, a doctor. Martin runs a family practice in Kristianstad. He's been a physician for over 20 years. He's well known in the community, respected. He volunteers at health clinics. He's married. He has 2 adult children. He coaches youth soccer. He's exactly the kind of person you'd trust, which is why no one suspected him. Police go to the farm on Wednesday, September 11th, to question Martin. He's home. He answers the door in casual clothes, jeans, a sweater. He's polite, calm. He invites the officers inside. Yes, he knows Anna. She's a patient of his. She came to the farm on Sunday evening. She'd called him earlier that day, saying she needed to discuss a medical issue but didn't want to come to the clinic. Something personal, embarrassing. Martin agreed to see her at his home. It wasn't unusual. He occasionally saw patients outside regular hours, especially for sensitive matters. Anna arrived around 7:45. They talked in his home office for about an hour. She was dealing with anxiety. He prescribed some medication and gave her some samples to try. Then she left. Around 9 o'clock, he assumed she went home. He hasn't heard from her since. The officers ask if they can search the property. Martin hesitates, just for a moment. Then he agrees. Of course, whatever you need. The officers search the house first, room by room. Nothing unusual. It's a typical family home. Comfortable, well-maintained. They search the barn. Some old farm equipment. Tools. Hay bales. Nothing suspicious. They search the fields. Nothing. Then one of the officers, a young constable named Eric Svensson, notices a structure behind the barn. It's concrete, maybe 3 meters by 4 meters, low profile, partially obscured by some overgrown bushes. It looks like a storage shed, or maybe an old root cellar. There's a single steel door, heavy, industrial looking, with a serious lock, not a padlock. An integrated lock mechanism built into the door itself. Svensson walks over to it. "What's in here?" he asks Martin. "Storage," Martin says. His voice is steady, calm. "Tools, gardening equipment. Can we see inside?" Martin hesitates again, longer this time. "I don't have the key with me. It's at the clinic, in my office." Svensson and his partner, an older officer named Lars Bergman, exchange glances. "Something is wrong. We can wait while you get it," Bergman says. Martin's face goes pale. He knows. They know. He turns suddenly and runs. He doesn't make it far. Bergman tackles him in the middle of the yard. Martin fights for a moment, then goes limp. Bergman cuffs him. "What's in the shed, Martin?" Bergman asks. Martin doesn't answer. He's crying. Svensson radios for backup and a breaching team. They're not waiting for a key. When the tactical unit arrives 30 minutes later, they approach the concrete structure carefully. They try the lock first. It's high grade, industrial, the kind you'd use for a safe or a vault, not a garden shed. They cut it with a hydraulic cutter. It takes 10 minutes. The lock finally gives way. They pull open the door, and behind it is another door, less than a meter behind the first. This one is even heavier, steel reinforced, with soundproofing material attached to the back, thick foam, the kind used in recording studios. And there's a locking mechanism on the inside. Multiple bolts. This isn't storage. This is a cell. The team breaches the second door with a battering ram. It takes 6 hits before it gives way. Inside, they find Anna, alive. She's sitting on a small bed in the corner, her back against the wall. She's wearing a hospital gown. Her hands and feet are shackled, metal cuffs connected to chains bolted into the concrete floor. There's a bucket in one corner for waste. A small table with plastic bottles of water and some packaged food, and a camera mounted on the ceiling, its red recording light blinking. The room is sterile. White tiles on the floor and walls. Fluorescent lights overhead, buzzing. It looks like a medical examination room, but with no windows, no way out, and chains. Anna is in shock. She can barely speak. Her eyes are unfocused. The officers carefully remove the shackles and help her out of the bunker. She collapses as soon as she's outside, her legs giving out. She hasn't walked more than a few feet in 6 days. An ambulance is called. Paramedics treat her at the scene before transporting her to the hospital. Anna has been inside that concrete box for 6 days. The full investigation reveals the horror of Martin's planning. Martin Trenneborg had been fantasizing about kidnapping someone for years, possibly decades. He'd kept detailed journals, found during a search of his home office, dating back to the late 1990s. The journals describe his fantasies in clinical detail. He wrote about wanting to study human behavior under controlled conditions, about wanting complete control over another person. He'd been planning the bunker since at least 2010. He built it himself over the course of 5 years, telling his wife and neighbors that he was constructing a storm shelter. Sweden doesn't have tornadoes, but Martin claimed he was worried about extreme weather events due to climate change. Everyone believed him. He ordered the materials carefully. Concrete, soundproofing foam, ventilation equipment, all purchased from different suppliers over years to avoid creating a pattern. The bunker's walls were 32 centimeters thick, reinforced concrete, completely soundproof. The doors were designed to be airtight. He'd installed a ventilation system with filters, originally designed for clean rooms and hospitals. The air inside could be completely isolated from the outside. It was perfect. Martin had targeted Anna specifically. She'd been his patient for about 2 years. She suffered from anxiety and depression. Martin had been prescribing her medication, benzodiazepines, primarily. But over the past year, he'd been gradually increasing her dosage, making her more dependent, more compliant. On Sunday, September 8th, He'd called her. He told her he had some new medication he wanted her to try, but he needed to monitor her reaction. Could she come to his farm? He'd observe her for a few hours to make sure there were no adverse effects. Anna trusted him. He was her doctor. She went. When she arrived, Martin gave her a drink. Water, he said, with some electrolytes. She drank it. Within minutes, she felt dizzy. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't work. Martin caught her as she fell. When she woke up, she was in the bunker, shackled. Martin visited her multiple times a day. He wore a mask, a full-face rubber mask that made him look like a mannequin. Featureless. Terrifying. He never spoke. He would enter the bunker, check her vital signs, adjust her medication, bring food and water, then leave. Anna tried to talk to him, to plead with him, to ask why. He never responded. The camera recorded everything. But here's what disturbs investigators the most. Martin's plan was open-ended. He hadn't decided how long he would keep her. The bunker was stocked with enough supplies to last months, maybe years if rationed. And there was that drain, hidden beneath a removable tile in the floor, connected to a septic system. It would have been very easy to dispose of evidence. During the trial, Martin's defense argued that he was mentally ill, that he'd built the bunker during a psychotic break, that he hadn't intended to harm Anna. The prosecution countered with the journals. 20 years of fantasies, 5 years of construction, 2 years of grooming, a victim. This wasn't illness. This was premeditation. The prosecution also revealed something Martin had told a court-appointed psychiatrist during evaluation. When asked why he finally acted on his fantasies in 2015, after years of planning, Martin said, "I realized I was getting older. If I didn't do it soon, I never would. And I needed to know." "Know what?" the psychiatrist asked. "If it would feel the way I imagined." "Did it?" Martin paused. "No, it was better." Martin Trenneborg was convicted of kidnapping, aggravated assault, unlawful imprisonment, and drugging. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, the maximum available under Swedish law at the time. Many, including the prosecution, felt it was insufficient. Anna survived physically, but the psychological trauma is permanent. In her victim impact statement read in court, she wrote, "The worst part wasn't the chains. It wasn't the darkness. It wasn't even the fear that I would die. The worst part was realizing that someone had spent years building a prison specifically for me, that I had been chosen, that every detail, the walls, the doors, the camera, had been designed with me in mind. That to him, I wasn't a person. I was a project. I wasn't a person. I was a project." This case exposed a terrifying vulnerability in modern society. With enough time, money, and planning, almost anyone can build a completely isolated space. A bunker, a cell, a tomb, and the structure itself becomes the weapon. The concrete doesn't care what it's used for. It just holds. The bunker on Martin's farm was demolished in 2016. The Swedish government ordered it filled with concrete and buried. The property was sold. The farmhouse was torn down. But the memory remains of a doctor who spent years preparing the perfect cage and almost got away with it. The Silo of Death. Deer Trail, Colorado, June 15th, 2008. 3 teenagers decide to explore an abandoned missile silo. The silo is located about 50 miles east of Denver, in the flat, empty grasslands of eastern Colorado. It's a Titanite complex, one of dozens built across the American Midwest during the height of the Cold War. The Titanite was the first true intercontinental ballistic missile deployed by the United States. Operational between 1959 and 1965, these missiles represented the cutting edge of nuclear weapons technology. Each missile was nearly 100 feet tall and weighed over 220,000 pounds when fueled. The missiles were designed to deliver a 4-megaton nuclear warhead, roughly 267 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, to targets in the Soviet Union. The range was over 6,000 miles. From a silo in Colorado, a Titanite could hit Moscow. But the Titanite had a critical flaw. It used liquid fuel, a hypergolic mixture of RP-1 kerosene and liquid oxygen that was incredibly volatile. The fuel couldn't be stored in the missile. It had to be loaded immediately before launch from massive underground tanks. The fueling process took 15 minutes. In a nuclear war scenario, where Soviet missiles could reach the United States in under 30 minutes, 15 minutes was an eternity. By 1965, the Titan I was obsolete. The Air Force had developed the Titan II, which used storable liquid fuel, and the Minuteman missile, which used solid fuel and could be launched in under 60 seconds. All 18 Titan I complexes were decommissioned between 1964 and 1965. The missiles were removed. The fuel was drained. The classified equipment was stripped out, and the massive underground complexes were simply abandoned. Most were sold to private owners for a few $1,000s. Some were converted into storage facilities or homes, but most were just left to decay. The complex near Deer Trail was one of the abandoned ones. It had been sitting empty for over 40 years, slowly flooding, slowly rusting, slowly becoming a death trap. The three teenagers, we'll call them Kyle, Brandon, and Jessica, were all 17 years old, juniors at a high school in Aurora, a suburb of Denver. They were good kids. Good grades, no criminal records. Just bored teenagers looking for adventure on a Saturday afternoon. They'd heard about the silo from friends who'd explored it months earlier. There were photos on social media. Dark tunnels, rusted equipment, graffiti covering the walls. It looked like something from a post-apocalyptic movie. They decided to check it out. Kyle drove his pickup truck. They left Aurora around 2 in the afternoon, taking Interstate 70 east toward the Kansas border, then turning south on a series of county roads. The landscape out here is stark, flattened, empty, golden grasslands stretching to the horizon in every direction. Occasional farmhouses, miles apart. No trees, no hills, just endless sky. After about 40 minutes of driving through farmland, they found the turnoff. A dirt road marked by a faded bullet-riddled sign that read "No trespassing, US government property." The sign was from the 1960s. No one had maintained this property in decades. They drove down the dirt road for about a mile. The road was rough, barely more than tire tracks through the grass. Then they saw it. A concrete structure rising out of the prairie. The antenna terminal. It was a low, bunker-like building, maybe 15 feet by 30 feet. Concrete walls covered in layers of graffiti, tags, dates, drawings, profanity. The concrete was cracked and weathered, with weeds growing through the fissures. There was a heavy steel door on one side, rusted, hanging half open, like a mouth. They parked the truck and grabbed their flashlights. Kyle had brought a powerful lid flashlight. Brandon had his phone. Jessica had a smaller flashlight. They approached the entrance. "Are we sure about this?" Jessica asked. "It'll be fine," Kyle said. "People explore these all the time." They stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately. Outside, it was warm, mid-70s. Inside it was cool, maybe 55 degrees. The air smelled damp, musty, like a basement that hasn't been opened in years. Inside the antenna terminal was a metal staircase, descending into darkness. The stairs were industrial, steel grating, rusted but still solid. They tested the first few steps carefully. They held. The three of them started down. 20 steps. A landing. Turn. 20 more steps. Another landing. Turn. They were descending in a spiral, going deeper and deeper underground. After the third landing, they reached the bottom, maybe 40 feet below the surface. At the bottom was a corridor. Long, narrow, maybe 6 feet wide and 8 feet high. Concrete walls on both sides, covered in more graffiti. The floor was wet, not flooded, just damp. Water had seeped through the walls and pooled in places. Their flashlights cut through the darkness. The beams revealed doors branching off the main corridor. Some were open, some were closed, some were rusted shut. The Titan I complex was massive. Each complex consisted of 3 separate missile silos arranged in a triangle, connected by underground tunnels. The complex also included power rooms, control rooms, crew quarters, equipment bays, and fuel storage. Miles of tunnels, hundreds of rooms. Most of it flooded or collapsed after decades of neglect, but some sections were still accessible. Kyle, Brandon and Jessica explored for about an hour. They found the old control room. The walls still had faded diagrams showing missile trajectories and targeting information. Some of the old control panels were still there. Switches, dials, indicator lights, all dead, all covered in rust. They found the crew quarters, small rooms with metal bunks bolted to the walls. Graffiti covered every surface. Jason was here, 23 class of 7. The end is near. They found equipment rooms filled with rusted machinery, massive electrical panels, pump systems, ventilation, equipment, all slowly decaying. Jessica took photos on her phone. Brandon made a video, narrating like they were on a documentary. Kyle led the way, checking doors and passages. Then Kyle noticed something they hadn't explored yet. A passage leading off the main corridor. A sign on the wall, barely visible under layers of rust and graffiti, read, "Silo 1 access." "That's one of the missile silos," Kyle said. "Should we check it out?" Brandon asked. "Definitely." They entered the passage. It sloped downward at a steep angle. The floor was wet here, more than just damp. There was actual standing water, an inch or two deep. Their footsteps splashed as they walked. The passage was maybe 50 feet long. At the end was a doorway. Beyond the doorway was something that stopped them in their tracks. The missile silo. It was staggering. The silo was a massive cylindrical chamber, roughly 50 feet in diameter and over 150 feet deep. The walls were concrete and steel, and around the interior, spiraling down to the darkness, was a system of metal catwalks and platforms. A spiral staircase leading into the abyss. Most of the catwalks were heavily rusted. Some sections had collapsed entirely, leaving gaps in the spiral. Jessica shined her flashlight down. The beam disappeared into darkness. You couldn't see the bottom, but you could hear it. Water. Dripping. Echoing. Somewhere far below was a pool of water. Decades of groundwater, seepage, and rain runoff collecting at the bottom of the silo. The echo was haunting. Every drip sounded like it was falling forever before hitting the water. "Whoa," Brandon whispered. His voice echoed. "Whoa. Whoa. Whoa." Kyle stepped closer to the edge of the silo. There was a metal railing, or what was left of one. Most of it had rusted away. He grabbed one of the posts. It crumbled in his hand, just disintegrated into rust flakes. "This is insane," Kyle said. Jessica felt uneasy. "Maybe we should head back." "Let me just get a better look," Kyle said. He stepped out onto one of the catwalks. The catwalk extended about 10 feet from the doorway, connecting to a platform that had once been part of the maintenance system for the missile. "Kyle, be careful," Jessica said. "It's fine," Kyle said. "It's holding." He took another step. The metal groaned, a deep, metallic sound that echoed through the silo. Kyle froze. "Kyle, come back," Brandon said. "Just one more step. I want to see how far down it goes." He took a third step. The catwalk sagged, visibly. The metal was so rusted that it was barely holding together. The bolts connecting the catwalk to the wall were corroded through. Kyle realized his mistake. He tried to step back, but his weight had already shifted the structure. The bolts sheared. All at once, the entire section of catwalk, about 12 feet long, broke free from the wall. Kyle didn't even have time to scream. He just fell. Brandon and Jessica watched in horror as Kyle and the section of metal catwalk tumbled into the darkness below. They heard the impacts. The catwalk hit other debris on the way down. Each impact was a metallic crash that echoed through the silo. Then a final impact. A splash. Then silence. For maybe 3 seconds, there was complete silence. Then Jessica screamed, "Kyle!" Her voice echoed, "Kyle, Kyle, Kyle." No response. Brandon leaned over the edge, shining his phone light down. But the beam didn't reach far enough. All he could see was darkness. "Kyle!" he shouted. "Kyle. Kyle. Kyle." Nothing. Brandon pulled out his phone to call 911. No signal. They were too deep underground. The concrete walls were too thick. No cell phone signal could penetrate. "We have to go get help," Brandon said. His voice was shaking. Jessica was crying. They ran. Back through the passage. Back through the corridor. Up the spiral staircase. The climb felt endless. By the time they reached the surface, both of them were gasping for air. They ran to the truck. Brandon tried his phone again. 1 bar. He dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? My friend fell in a missile silo. We need help. Please. He fell so far. Sir, slow down. Where are you? Brandon tried to explain. He wasn't sure of the exact location. They'd just been following directions from friends. We're near Deer Trail. There's an old missile silo. He fell. We need help now. Stay where you are. I'm dispatching units. They waited by the truck. It felt like hours. It was actually about 20 minutes. A sheriff's deputy arrived first. Then, an ambulance. Then a fire truck. Brandon and Jessica explained what happened. The deputy called for more resources. This wasn't a simple rescue. The Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department had to call in specialized teams. Urban search and rescue from Denver. Technical rope rescue specialists. The fire department's confined space rescue team. It took hours to organize. By the time the full rescue team arrived, it was nearly 10 o'clock at night. They set up lights around the entrance to the silo. Industrial lights, powered by a generator. The lights illuminated the antenna terminal, like a stage. The technical rescue team geared up. Harnesses, helmets, ropes, They carried specialized equipment for confined space rescue. They descended into the complex. The team leader was a man named Tom Hendricks. He'd been doing technical rescue for 15 years. He'd worked mine collapses, building collapses, cave rescues. But he'd never worked a missile silo. When they reached the silo chamber, Hendricks looked down. His heart sank. The silo was a vertical tunnel disappearing into darkness. And the catwalks were all compromised, rusted, and unstable. They couldn't use the catwalks to descend. They'd have to rappel. They set up an anchor point at the top of the silo, a portable tripod with a pulley system. They rigged ropes and began the descent. Hendricks went first. He descended slowly, playing out rope, his headlamp cutting through the darkness. He passed the first platform, 20 feet down, then the second platform, 40 feet. The walls of the silo were covered in rust and calcium deposits from water seepage. He kept descending, 60 feet, 80 feet, 100 feet. His headlamp beam finally reached the bottom. Water, about 3 feet deep, and debris, twisted metal from collapsed catwalks, concrete chunks from deteriorating walls, and Kyle. He was lying face down in the water, surrounded by pieces of the catwalk that had fallen with him. Hendricks reached the bottom. He waded through the water to Kyle. He checked for a pulse. Nothing. Kyle was dead. The fall had killed him, probably instantly. From this height, estimated at 130 feet, the impact would have been equivalent to being hit by a car at 70 miles per hour. Multiple fractures, massive internal trauma, no chance of survival. Hendricks radioed up. We have a recovery situation. Victim is deceased. The recovery took another 6 hours. They had to package Kyle's body in a rescue basket, then haul him up using the rope system. 130 feet of vertical lifting. Slowly, carefully. By the time they brought Kyle's body to the surface, it was nearly 6 in the morning. The sun was rising over the prairie. Jessica and Brandon were still there, waiting. When they saw the rescue basket, they knew. David and Karen, Kyle's parents, were called at 4 in the morning by a sheriff's deputy. The worst call any parent can receive. They drove to the site. They arrived just as the rescue team was bringing Kyle's body up. Karen collapsed when she saw the basket. David stood there, silent, staring at the concrete structure that had swallowed his son. This wasn't the first death in a Titan ice silo, and it wouldn't be the last. Across the Midwest, there are 18 decommissioned Titan I complexes. Colorado has 3, Washington has 3, California has 4, and the rest are scattered through Idaho, Wyoming, and South Dakota. Almost all of them are dangerous. The structures are decaying. Concrete is cracking from freeze-thaw cycles and water infiltration. Metal is rusting through. Catwalks are collapsing, but people keep exploring them. Urban explorers looking for adventure. Photographers looking for dramatic shots. teenagers looking for something to do on a Saturday, and some of them don't come out. In 2004, a 23-year-old man named Derek Simmons fell 70 feet in a Titanized silo near Moses Lake, Washington. He survived, but he suffered a broken back, broken pelvis, and severe internal injuries. He's paralyzed from the waist down. In 2011, two teenagers in California, 15 and 16 years old, got trapped when a section of tunnel collapsed behind them while they were exploring a silo near Beale Air Force Base. They were trapped for 18 hours before rescue teams could dig them out. In 2013, a 29-year-old woman named Amy Chen drowned in a flooded equipment bay in a Colorado silo. She'd been exploring with friends. They'd entered a room they thought was dry, but the floor gave way and she fell through into a flooded chamber below. Her body was found 3 days later. In 2016, a man in Idaho entered a silo alone and simply disappeared. His car was found at the entrance, but he was never found. Search teams explored for weeks. They never located his body. The silo system was too vast, too complex, too flooded. He could be anywhere. These silos are death traps, but they're also scattered across remote, rural areas where law enforcement is stretched thin. The Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department covers over 800 square miles with a limited number of deputies. They can't patrol every abandoned Cold War site, and there are dozens of them in their jurisdiction alone. After Kyle's death, sheriff's deputies started checking the Deer Trail silo more frequently. They installed new no trespassing signs. They tried to weld the entrance shut, but within a year, someone had cut through the welds. The entrance was open again, and the graffiti inside continued to get fresher. People are still going in. Kyle's death led to some legislative attempts. His parents, David and Karen, started a campaign to raise awareness about the dangers of abandoned military sites. They created a website, Silent Sentinels, The Hidden Danger of Cold War Ruins. They contacted other families who'd lost children or loved ones in similar accidents. They lobbied the Colorado State Legislature to pass laws requiring better security at abandoned military sites. But the response was tepid. The problem is ownership. The federal government no longer owns most of these sites. They were sold to private owners decades ago, and the current owners often can't afford to properly secure or demolish them. Demolishing a Titanized silo costs millions of dollars. The structures were designed to withstand a nuclear blast. You can't just knock them down. You have to use controlled demolitions, fill them with concrete, or seal them permanently. Most private owners don't have that kind of money, so the silos just sit there, slowly decaying, slowly killing people. The Deer Trail silo where Kyle died is still accessible today. The county has tried multiple times to seal it, but it keeps getting reopened. Last year, a group of urban explorers posted photos from inside on Instagram. The photos are dated April 2024. The catwalk where Kyle fell is still broken. You can see the gap where the metal used to be, but people are still going down there, still taking risks, still not understanding that the structure itself is the danger. This is the horror of Cold War architecture. These silos were built to survive the end of the world, but now they're ending individual worlds. Quietly, methodically, one fall at a time. Kyle was 17 when he died. He was a good student, 3.8 GPA. He played basketball for his high school. He wanted to study engineering at Colorado State University. He'd already been accepted. His parents buried him in a cemetery in Aurora. The headstone has his name, his dates, and a single line, taken too soon by the darkness below. But here's what haunts investigators and rescue workers about these cases. How many bodies are still down there? The silos are vast. Miles of tunnels, hundreds of rooms, shafts dropping 150 feet into flooded basements. If someone falls into a collapsed section, or gets trapped in a sealed room, or drowns in a flooded chamber, they might never be found, and the search teams can only cover so much ground. And the silos are dangerous for rescuers too. Tom Hendricks, the rescue team leader who recovered Kyle's body, told reporters, "Every time we go into one of these silos, we're taking our lives in our hands. The structures are unstable. The air quality is questionable. The water is contaminated. And we never know what we're going to find." These places were built to last forever. But forever doesn't mean safe. There are persistent stories, unconfirmed but consistent, of other bodies being found in these silos. A homeless person who'd been using a silo for shelter and got trapped when a passage collapsed. An urban explorer who fell and was never reported missing because he was estranged from his family. A group of teenagers who got lost in the tunnel system and ran out of air. These stories circulate on forums and social media, but official records are incomplete because many of these sites are on private property and deaths that occur there might not be reported immediately or at all. The silos are tombs, not just for the apocalypse that never came, but for the people who wandered in and never left. And they're still waiting, still open, still dark, still hungry. The Kingdom of the Dark Web. Traben-Trarbach, Germany. September 27th, 2019. 600 police officers surround a bunker. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Still dark. The bunker is located in a small, picturesque town in western Germany, near the Luxembourg border. Traben-Trarbach is a wine region. Rolling hills covered in vineyards. Population around 5,000. Quiet, gay, peaceful. The kind of place where nothing ever happens. Except today. Today, 600 heavily armed police officers are about to breach a former NATO bunker that has become the physical headquarters of some of the darkest corners of the internet. The target is a man named Herman Johan Zenten, 49 years old, Dutch national, and the operator of CyberBunker, a bulletproof hosting service that has become the backbone of the dark web. The story begins in the early 2000s. Zent was a tech entrepreneur. He'd worked in IT for years, started several companies, some legitimate, some less so. But he had a vision. He wanted to create a hosting service that was truly bulletproof. A place where websites could operate without fear of being shut down by law enforcement, or governments or angry corporations. Complete freedom. No censorship. No takedowns. No compliance with legal requests. In 2002, Zent launched CyberBunker. The pitch was simple. We host anything. No questions asked. Well, almost anything. Zent claimed he drew the line at child abuse and terrorism. Everything else was fair game. Drug markets? Hosted. Weapons sales? Hosted. Stolen data marketplaces? Hosted. Malware distribution? Hosted. Botnets? Hosted. Deals for hire services? Hosted. Counterfeit currency operations? Hosted. If your website would get you arrested in most countries, CyberBunker would host it for a price. And the price was steep. Hosting on CyberBunker could cost thousands of euros per month. But for criminals operating on the dark web, it was worth it. Because Zent had one ironclad policy. He would never, under any circumstances, cooperate with law enforcement. Ever. Warrants? Ignored. Court orders? Ignored. Europol requests? Ignored. FBI requests? Laughed at. Zent positioned himself as a defender of internet freedom and free speech. But in reality, he was running a criminal infrastructure service, and he was making millions. For the first decade, CyberBunker operated out of various locations in the Netherlands and Germany. Regular data centers. Rented space in server farms. But law enforcement was starting to notice. Europol, the European Union's law enforcement agency, had identified CyberBunker as a key player in the dark web ecosystem. They wanted to shut it down, but there was a problem. Taking down the servers was difficult. CyberBunker moved locations frequently, used shell companies to rent space, employed sophisticated counter-surveillance, and Zent refused to cooperate with any legal process. Then, in 2013, Zent found his perfect location, a former NATO bunker in Traben-Trarbach. The bunker had been built in the 1970s as part of NATO's Cold War infrastructure. It was designed as a command and control center, a place where military leadership could coordinate operations in case of Soviet invasion. The bunker was enormous, 5 stories, over 60 rooms, built into a hillside. The walls were 2 meters thick, reinforced concrete designed to withstand a direct nuclear strike. The bunker could house 230 people for 30 days without resupply. It had its own power generation, massive diesel generators in the basement, its own water filtration, drawing from underground aquifers, its own air filtration with NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical protection, multiple blast doors weighing several tons each, advanced security systems, backup systems for the backup systems. It was a fortress, and it was for sale. After the Cold War ended, NATO had no use for it. The bunker was decommissioned in the late 1990s and sold to a private owner. That owner eventually sold it to Zent for a reported €150 million. Zent immediately began converting it into a data center. He filled the rooms with server racks, thousands of them. Black Tower servers humming 24 hours a day. He upgraded the power systems to handle the massive electrical load. He installed industrial cooling systems to keep the servers from overheating. He reinforced the security. Chain link fences topped with razor wire. Security cameras covering every angle. Motion sensors. Armed guards at the entrance. He turned the NATO bunker into a fortress for the dark web. And business boomed. From 2013 to 2019, CyberBunker hosted some of the largest illegal operations on the internet. Silk Road 2, a drug marketplace. Wall Street Market, another major drug marketplace, and Hansa Market, yet another. Dozens of smaller markets, selling everything from weapons to stolen credit cards to forged documents. Botnet command and control servers that controlled millions of infected computers worldwide. Malware distribution networks. Ransomware operations. DOS-for-hire services that could take down websites and networks on demand. The scale was staggering. Estimates suggest that websites hosted on CyberBunker servers facilitated over €1 billion in illegal transactions. 1 billion. But law enforcement was building a case. Europol had been tracking CyberBunker for years. They'd infiltrated some of the markets hosted on Zent servers. They'd identified his clients through financial forensics. They'd built a network map of his entire operation. And they'd been watching the bunker. Surveillance. Satellite imagery. Undercover operations. By 2019, they had enough. On September 26th, Europol coordinated with German federal police, the Bundeskriminalamt, to plan the raid. But there was a significant problem. The bunker was designed to withstand an attack. You couldn't just knock on the door and walk in. The blast doors alone weighed several tons, and Zent had added his own security measures. Reinforced locks, electronic countermeasures, armed security. The raid had to be planned like a military operation. Operation Disruptor. 600 officers. Federal police tactical units from multiple German states. Bomb disposal teams. Electronic warfare specialists capable of jamming communications. Forensic computer experts. Prosecutors. They assembled in the pre-dawn hours of September 27th. The operational briefing was held at a staging area 5 kilometers from the bunker. The tactical commander laid out the plan. Simultaneous breach at multiple points. Cut external power to disable electronic security. Breach the outer blast door with hydraulic cutting tools. Secure the vestibule. Breach the inner blast door. Clear the bunker room by room. At exactly 5 o'clock in the morning, the operation began. Tactical teams surrounded the property. All roads leading to the bunker were blocked. Power lines to the bunker were cut. The outer security fence was breached. Officers moved to the main entrance. The blast door was massive, steel reinforced, designed to seal shut in case of nuclear attack. The breach team set up hydraulic cutting equipment, industrial-grade tools capable of cutting through steel. It took 2 hours. The sound of cutting echoed across the hillside. Finally, the outer door gave way. The team moved into the security vestibule, an airlock chamber designed to prevent contamination from entering the bunker. There was another blast door, even heavier than the first. The team set up cutting equipment again, but this door had been reinforced. Zent had added additional steel plating. The cutting tools weren't working fast enough. The tactical commander made a decision. Controlled explosives. The bomb disposal team placed shaped charges around the door's locking mechanism. Everyone pulled back. The explosion was muffled but powerful. The door buckled. It didn't fully breach, but the locking mechanism was destroyed. The team used a battering ram on the weakened door. It took 6 hits. Finally, the inner blast door swung open, and the tactical team entered CyberBunker. The first level was living quarters, and it was surreal. It didn't look like a criminal operation. It looked like an underground apartment complex. Nice furniture, flat-screen TVs, a full kitchen with modern appliances, bedrooms with comfortable beds, a lounge area with leather couches, plants in pots, artwork on the walls. It was designed to be livable because people lived here and had a staff that worked in shifts, maintaining the servers 24 hours a day. Some of them lived in the bunker full-time. The tactical team cleared the first level. No resistance. They moved to the second level. Offices, desks with multiple monitors, whiteboards covered with network diagrams and technical specifications, filing cabinets. It looked like a normal tech company, except it was underground, in a nuclear bunker. The third level was the heart of the operation, the server farm. The team entered through a heavy door and were hit by a wall of sound, the hum of thousands of servers, and cold air, the cooling system running at full capacity to prevent the equipment from overheating. The room was enormous. Row after row of black server racks, each rack filled with tower servers. Thousands of blinking lights, green, yellow, red, indicating status. Ethernet cables running everywhere. The floor was a raised platform to allow for cable management underneath. This was the dark web. Physical form. These servers hosted the websites, the markets, the forums, the services. Everything that existed in the hidden corners of the internet was right here, in this room. Officers began the shutdown procedure, but they had to be careful. If they just pulled the plugs, they could lose data. The forensic team needed to preserve everything for evidence. They began shutting down servers systematically, imaging hard drives before powering them off. It would take days. The team continued clearing the bunker. Fourth level, more servers and networking equipment. Fifth level, power generation and mechanical systems. And throughout the bunker, they found people. Zent and 6 of his associates. They were arrested without incident. No resistance. No drama. Zent was actually calm, almost amused. When officers cuffed him, he said, "You realize this changes nothing, right? The network is distributed. You're just shutting down one node." "We'll see," the arresting officer replied. The forensic analysis took months. Investigators sifted through terabytes of data, hard drives, server logs, financial records, communications. What they found was overwhelming evidence of Zent's involvement in facilitating organized crime. CyberBunker had been hosting over 200 websites involved in illegal activity, drug markets with millions of registered users. The Wall Street market alone had over 1 million user accounts and facilitated over $63 million in transactions before it was shut down. Hansa Market had over 10,000 drug listings. Botnet command servers controlling millions of infected computers worldwide. These botnets were used for everything from sending spam to launching massive DDoS attacks to mining cryptocurrency. Stolen data marketplaces selling credit card numbers, login credentials, and personal information. One marketplace had over 100 million stolen credit card numbers for sale. Counterfeit currency operations. High-resolution scans of euros and dollars that could be used to print fake bills. DDoS for hire services. For as little as 50 euros, you could hire these services to take down a website or network for hours or days. Ransomware distribution networks. Malware that would encrypt a victim's files and demand payment for the decryption key. The financial scale was staggering. The drug markets alone had facilitated over 1 billion euros in transactions. And CyberBunker took a cut of everything. Hosting fees, transaction fees, security fees. Zent had been making millions of euros per year. But what disturbed investigators most was the level of sophistication. Zent hadn't just been passively hosting these sites. He'd been actively protecting them. He'd built redundancy systems so that if law enforcement managed to take down one server, the website would automatically fail over to a backup server. He'd implemented counter-surveillance measures, encrypted communications, anonymous payment systems using cryptocurrency, physical security to prevent raids. He'd hired lawyers to fight any legal challenges. He'd created a network of shell companies to obscure ownership and financial flows. He'd turned the bunker into a fortress, not to protect against nuclear war, but to protect criminal operations. During the trial, which began in 2020 and lasted over a year, Exonent's defense tried to argue that he was simply a hosting provider, that he wasn't responsible for what his clients did with their servers, that he was defending internet freedom and free speech. The prosecution demolished that argument. They presented chat logs showing Zent discussing specific illegal operations with clients. They showed that he'd offered technical advice on how to evade law enforcement. They demonstrated that he'd knowingly provided infrastructure to criminal organizations. He wasn't a neutral provider. He was a co-conspirator. The evidence was overwhelming. In May 2021, Herman Johan Zent was convicted of facilitating organized crime, money laundering, drug trafficking, and various computer crimes. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. His 6 associates received sentences ranging from 3 to 7 years. CyberBunker was permanently shut down. The bunker was seized by the German government. The servers were destroyed. But here's the thing, the dark web didn't go away. Within weeks of CyberBunker being shut down, the major markets reappeared, hosted on different servers, in different countries, using different infrastructure. The network is distributed, decentralized. Taking down one node, even a major node like CyberBunker, is just temporary disruption. New hosting services appear to replace it. Some in countries with weak law enforcement. Some using cloud infrastructure that's harder to trace. Some using peer-to-peer networks that don't rely on central servers at all. The game continues. The raid on CyberBunker was a victory, but it wasn't the end. Today, the bunker in Treben-Charbach sits empty. The German government is still deciding what to do with it. Some have suggested turning it into a museum, a monument to the Cold War and the strange ways that infrastructure gets repurposed. Others want to demolish it, but demolition is expensive. Remember, those walls were designed to withstand a nuclear blast. For now, it just sits there, sealed, silent. A fortress that once protected against Soviet missiles, then protected the dark web, now protecting nothing but ghosts. The Nuclear Garden, Chilmark, Wiltshire, England, February 20th, 2017. A police helicopter is conducting a routine patrol over rural Wiltshire when the thermal imaging camera picks up something unusual. A heat signature, coming from the ground, in the middle of an empty field. This isn't normal. It's winter. February in England is cold. The ground should be frozen, or at least very cold. But the thermal camera is showing a large area, roughly 50 meters by 50 meters. That's significantly warmer than the surrounding terrain. The pilot circles the location. The heat signature is consistent, strong, and it's definitely coming from underground. The pilot radios it into the control center. Control, this is Air 1. I've got an anomalous thermal reading. Coordinates 51.3 north, 2.1 west. Large underground heat source. Could be a fire, but there's no smoke. Requesting ground units to investigate. Copy that. Air 1. Dispatching ground units now. The location is a field near the village of Chilmark, about 80 miles west of London. It's agricultural land, Edwy. Fields, sheep, stone farmhouses scattered across rolling hills. Quintessentially English countryside. There's nothing here that should be generating that much heat. 2 patrol cars from the Wiltshire Police arrive about 20 minutes later. The officers, Constables Harris and Mahmood, begin searching the field. It's muddy, cold, windy. They're not sure what they're looking for. Some kind of fire? A broken gas line? Then Harris spots a structure. A barn. Old, wooden, half collapsed. It looks like it's been abandoned for years. But as they approach, Mahmood notices something. Fresh tire tracks in the mud leading to the barn. Heavy vehicle tracks, like a truck or a large van. The tracks are recent, maybe from yesterday or this morning. The officers approach the barn cautiously. The door is partially open. Harris pushes it open wider. Inside, the barn is mostly empty. Some old farm equipment, rusted tools, hay bales that have been there for years. But in the center of the barn floor is something that doesn't belong. Plywood panels. New plywood, covering a large section of the floor. That's odd, Harris says. They approach the plywood. Mahmoud kneels down and tries to lift one of the panels. It's not nailed down, just resting in place. He lifts it. Underneath is a concrete staircase, descending into darkness, and a steel door at the bottom. Industrial. Heavy. Locked. What the hell? Mahmoud says. Harris radios for backup. Control. We found an underground entrance. Steel door. Locked. We're going to need a breaching team and probably CID. Sid. Criminal Investigation Department. Copy that. Backup en route. Do not enter until tactical support arrives. Harris and Mahmoud wait. Within an hour, more units arrive. Tactical support. A sergeant named Thompson who's been with Wiltshire Police for 20 years, and a locksmith. They descend the stairs. The steel door has a serious lock. Commercial grade. The locksmith examines it. This isn't a standard lock. It's high security. I can get through it, but it'll take time. How long? Thompson asks. 30 minutes. Maybe longer. Thompson makes a decision. Do it. While the locksmith works, Thompson runs the property records in. The barn and surrounding land are owned by a company called Chilmark Agricultural Services, Ltd. He digs deeper. The company is registered to an address in London. But when he calls the number listed, it's disconnected. Shell company. That's not good. The locksmith finally gets the door open. It swings inward, and immediately they're hit by a smell. Marijuana. Overwhelming. And heat. It's like opening an oven. Warm, humid air rushes out. Thompson draws his baton. Police! If anyone is inside, make yourself known now. No response. The tactical team enters first. Flashlights and batons ready. They descend into the underground space. The first thing they see is another door. About 3 meters past the first door. This one is also steel, but it's not locked. It's standing open. They pass through and enter the bunker. It's massive. The corridor extends in both directions, lined with doors. Industrial lighting overhead. Fluorescent tubes, some flickering. The walls are concrete. Thick. Old. With faded paint and military markings. Thompson recognizes it immediately. This is our HQ, Chilmark. Regional headquarters, Chilmark. A Cold War-era government bunker. Thompson had read about it years ago. It was built in the early 1980s as part of the UK's continuity of government plan. If London was hit by nuclear weapons, regional bunkers like this one would become the new centers of administration. Local government officials would take shelter here and continue running essential services. The bunker was designed to house 250 people for up to 30 days. It had everything: dormitories, kitchens, medical facilities, communication rooms, air filtration systems, NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical, protection, backup power generators. The bunker was decommissioned in the late 1990s when the Cold War ended. The government removed the sensitive equipment and sealed the entrances. Or so they thought. Someone had unsealed it and repurposed it. The tactical team moves through the bunker carefully. The first room they check is on the left, a dormitory. The original bunk beds are still there, but the room has been converted. The beds are gone from one side, replaced with something else. Cannabis plants, dozens of them, growing under industrial-strength hydroponic lights. The purple and yellow glow fills the room. It's surreal. A government facility designed to preserve civilization is now a drug farm. They check the next room. More plants. And the next. More plants. Every room is filled with cannabis in various stages of growth. Some rooms have seedlings. Some have mature plants ready for harvest. Some have drying racks with harvested buds. The scale is staggering. Thompson radios for more backup. And for a drug enforcement team, they're going to need specialists. The team continues deeper into the bunker. The corridors are lined with rooms, and every single room has been converted into a grow room. They estimate there are over 5,000 plants. The potential street value is over £2 million. But then they find something that changes everything. In one of the dormitories, they find people. 7 men, sleeping on mattresses on the floor. The officers enter quickly. "Police, don't move." The men wake up, startled. They don't resist. They just sit up, looking exhausted, defeated. One of the officers notices something. The men look malnourished, tired, scared. These aren't criminals. These are victims. Through a translator, one of the officers speaks some Vietnamese. They learn the truth. The men are Vietnamese nationals. They'd been trafficked to the UK with promises of legitimate work. Restaurant jobs, factory jobs, good pay. But when they arrived, everything changed. Their passports were taken. They were told they owed money, debts for their transportation, their housing, their food. The debts were enormous. £20,000, £30,000. They had to work off the debts. They were brought to the bunker and locked inside. They'd been here for months, some of them for over a year, working 20-hour days, tending the plants, watering, feeding, pruning, harvesting, drying, packaging, living in a nuclear bunker with no windows, no sunlight, no fresh air. They slept in shifts on the mattresses. They ate rice and instant noodles prepared on a hot platte. They used a makeshift toilet in one of the old bathrooms. And they couldn't leave. The doors were locked from the outside. They were prisoners. One of the men, his name is Tuan, speaks the most English. Through tears, he tells the officer, "We thought we were going to die down here. No one knew where we were. We couldn't call anyone. We couldn't escape. We just worked and waited to die." The men are immediately taken out of the bunker. Paramedics treat them at the scene. Dehydration, malnutrition, respiratory issues from the poor air quality, psychological trauma. They're transported to a hospital for further care. The investigation expands. Over the next several weeks, Wiltshire Police and the National Crime Agency, the UK's equivalent of the FBI, worked to dismantle the entire operation. They identify the criminal organization running the farm, a Vietnamese organized crime group with connections across Europe. The ringleader is a man named Minh Nguyen, 43 years old, UK resident, but with deep ties to criminal networks in Vietnam. Nguyen had discovered the bunker while researching abandoned Cold War sites. He'd realized its potential immediately: the isolation, the structural integrity, the security. He'd purchased the property through a shell company for £200,000. The government had been selling off these old bunkers for years, trying to recoup some of the original construction costs. Nguyen spent months preparing the bunker. He hired electricians to install the lighting and power systems, plumbers to set up the water systems for the hydroponic gardens. He brought in the grow equipment, thousands of pounds worth of lights, fans, nutrients, irrigation systems. And then he began trafficking workers. The operation had been running for at least 3 years. Police estimate that the bunker produced cannabis worth over £6 million during that time. But the profit came at a human cost. The 7 men they found were just the current shift. Nguyen had cycled workers in and out over the years. Some had been released after working off their supposed debts, but investigators suspect others were never released. Some may have died in the bunker, from exhaustion, from illness, from despair, and their bodies may have been disposed of in ways that will never be discovered. During the trial, Nguyen showed no remorse. He argued that he'd provided the workers with food, shelter, and work, that they should be grateful, that he'd given them opportunities they wouldn't have had in Vietnam. The judge was not impressed. In his sentencing remarks, Judge Harrison said, "You treated human beings as slaves. You locked them underground in conditions that can only be described as barbaric. You profited from their suffering. Your actions represent the worst kind of exploitation, and society will not tolerate." Minh Nguyen was convicted of human trafficking, forced labor, drug production, conspiracy to commit fraud, and multiple other charges. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison. 4 of his associates received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. The 7 men found in the bunker were granted asylum in the UK. They're receiving support from social services and counseling from trauma specialists. But the psychological scars are permanent. In an interview with a social worker, recorded for the court proceedings, Tuan said, "We lived aground for so long, I forgot what the sun looked like. I forgot what fresh air felt like. I forgot what freedom meant. Every day was the same. Wake up, work, sleep, wake up, work, sleep. In the dark, always in the dark. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm back there, in the bunker, and I panic, because I think I'll never get out." The bunker at Chilmark was permanently sealed after the raid. The Wiltshire County Council ordered it demolished, but demolition proved impossible. The structure was too robust, built to survive a nuclear blast. Instead, they filled the entrance shaft with concrete, tons of it. Then they demolished the barn above and covered the entire site with earth. Today, it's just a grassy field. No sign of what lies beneath. But the story has become infamous in the UK. It exposed vulnerabilities that no one had considered. There are dozens, maybe hundreds, of these decommissioned Cold War bunkers across the UK. Most have been sold to private owners. Some have been converted into homes or museums. But some are just abandoned, and no one really knows what's happening inside them. The Chilmark case revealed how easily these structures can be exploited. The thick walls that were meant to keep radiation out also keep screams in. The air filtration systems designed to protect from chemical weapons can hide the smell of illegal operations. The isolation that was meant to preserve government continuity can be used to disappear people. This is the dark legacy of the Cold War. The infrastructure remains, and in the wrong hands, it becomes a tool for horror. The Cricket, Wilseyville, California, June 2nd, 1985. A man walks into a San Francisco lumberyard and tries to shoplift a vise. His name is Marcus Chen, 24 years old. He's caught almost immediately. The security guard confronts him. Chen pulls a gun. The guard doesn't back down. Chen shoots him. Not a fatal shot. The guard survives, but Chen runs. Police respond to the call. They search the area. They don't find Chen, but they find his car parked nearby. They run the plates. The car is registered to a man named Leonard Lake, 40 years old, living in Wilseyville, a tiny community in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, about 150 miles east of San Francisco. Police go to question Lake. They find him at another location, a friend's property where he'd been staying temporarily. When officers approach, Lake is cooperative, polite, evened. But then they ask about Marcus Chen. Lake's demeanor changes. "I need to tell you something," he says. He reaches into his pocket. The officers tense, but Lake pulls out a pill and swallows it. Cyanide. He collapses within seconds, foaming at the mouth, convulsing. The officers call for an ambulance, but it's too late. Lake dies 4 days later in the hospital, never regaining consciousness. The investigation shifts. Who was Leonard Lake? And why did he kill himself when asked about Marcus Chen? Police get a warrant to search Lake's property in Wilseyville. The property is remote, very remote, at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by dense forest. The nearest neighbor is over a mile away. The property consists of a small cabin, some outbuildings, and acres of forested land. It looks like a typical rural California property, run down, cluttered with junk cars and equipment. But when investigators start searching, they find something that changes everything. Behind the cabin, partially hidden by trees and brush, is a concrete structure. It's crude, made of cinder blocks, maybe 10 feet by 12 feet, with a wooden door. Investigators open the door. Inside is a single room, windowless. The walls are cinder block, unpainted. The floor is concrete. There's a single metal bed frame bolted to the floor, shackles attached to the bed, a bucket in the corner, and a video camera on a tripod in one corner, pointed at the bed. This isn't a storage shed. This is a cell, a prison, a torture chamber. The investigators' stomachs sink. They know what they found. They search the rest of the property more carefully. In the cabin, they find videotapes. Dozens of them, stacked on shelves, labeled with dates. The lead investigator, Sergeant Tom Eisenman, takes one of the tapes and plays it on a VCR they find in the cabin. What he sees makes him physically ill. The tape shows a woman, young, maybe mid-20s. She's shackled to the bed in the cinderblock room. Leonard Lake is visible on camera. He's speaking to her calmly, almost conversationally. He tells her that her boyfriend is dead, that her baby has been given away, that she's going to stay here for as long as he wants, that she's going to do whatever he says. The woman is crying, pleading. Lake continues speaking, explaining his rules. His Operation Miranda, named after the John Fowles novel The Collector, where a man kidnaps a woman to keep her as a possession. Lake explains that she is now his property, that she has no rights, that no one is looking for her, that no one will ever find her. The tape continues for over an hour. Eisenman can't watch it all. He stops the tape and steps outside. He needs air. The investigation expands rapidly. More officers arrive. FBI agents, forensic teams. They begin a systematic search of the entire property. In the cabin, they find more videotapes, over 25 of them, each one showing a different victim, or sometimes the same victims at different times. All women, all young, all being held captive, all being tortured. The tapes are evidence of systematic, prolonged torture and murder. But where are the victims? The search team spreads out across the property. They use ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, metal detectors, looking for graves. They find them. The first grave is discovered about 50 yards from the cabin. It's shallow, marked by a slight depression in the earth. They begin excavating. They find human remains, badly decomposed. They keep searching. Over the next several weeks, they find more graves, scattered across the property. Some contain bodies. Some contain body parts. Some contain personal belongings, IDs, wallets, jewelry, belonging to missing persons. The forensic analysis is grueling. The remains are fragmented, decomposed, mixed together in some cases. But investigators are able to identify some of the victims. Kathleen Allen, 25 years old, disappeared in 1984 with her boyfriend Michael Carroll, both dead. Lonnie Bond Sr., his girlfriend Brenda O'Connor, and their infant son, all dead. Robin Scott Stapley, 26 years old, disappeared in 1984, dead. Harvey Dubbs, his wife Deborah, their 16-month-old son Sean, all dead. The list continues. In total, investigators believe Lake and Chen murdered at least 11 people, possibly more. Some victims were never identified. Some graves may never be found. The property covers over 2 acres of dense forest. But here's what makes this case particularly horrifying. The planning, the preparation. Leonard Lake had been preparing for this for years. He'd started building his bunker, the cinder block structure, in the late 1970s. He'd purchased a remote property specifically for its isolation. He'd stockpiled supplies, weapons, ammunition, survivalist gear. He created detailed plans for what he called Operation Miranda. The plans were found in his cabin. Notebooks filled with writings explaining his philosophy. He believed society was going to collapse. Nuclear war or economic collapse or some other catastrophe. And when it did, he wanted to be ready. But his preparation wasn't about survival. It was about control. His plan was to kidnap women before the collapse and keep them as slaves afterward. Sex slaves, domestic slaves, breeding stock to repopulate the world after the apocalypse. He'd been fantasizing about this for years, decades maybe. And in the early 1980s, he'd met Marcus Chen. Chen was younger, more impulsive, more violent. Together, they'd started acting on Lake's fantasies. But they didn't wait for the apocalypse. They started killing immediately. The victims followed a pattern. Lake and Chen would target young couples or families. They'd kill the men immediately, usually shot. Then they'd take the women to the bunker. The women would be held captive for weeks or months, raped repeatedly, tortured, degraded, Filmed. When Lake and Chen grew bored with a victim, they'd kill her, usually by strangulation or shooting. Then they'd bury the body on the property. The children were killed immediately. Investigators believe at least 2 infants were murdered. Sean Dubs, 16 months old. Lonnie Bond Jr., 2 years old. Their bodies were found buried on the property. The videotapes are the most damning evidence. They show Lake's calm, methodical cruelty. He speaks to the victims like they're objects, not people. Objects to be used and discarded. In one tape, he's showing the victim, a woman named Kathy, the bunker, explaining how soundproof it is. He claps his hands loudly. "Hear that?" he says. "No one can hear you. You can scream all you want. No one is coming." Kathy is crying. Lake continues the tour like he's showing off a new purchase. The bed is bolted down. The shackles are welded. "You can't break them. I tested them. The door locks from the outside. The walls are concrete. You're not getting out." The psychological torture is as bad as the physical. In another tape, Lake forces a victim named Brenda to write a letter to her family. "Tell them you're leaving voluntarily," he says. "Tell them you're starting a new life. Tell them not to look for you." Brenda's hands are shaking as she writes. Lake watches, satisfied. These letters were mailed to families, making them think their loved ones had simply chosen to disappear, delaying investigations, buying time. Marcus Chen fled to Canada after the shoplifting incident. He was eventually captured in Calgary in 1985 after another shoplifting attempt. But extradition took years. Chen fought it through the Canadian legal system. He wasn't extradited back to the United States until 1991. His trial didn't begin until 1998, 13 years after the crimes were discovered. The trial was a media sensation. The videotapes were shown in court. Jurors wept. Some had to be excused. The images haunted them for years. Chen's defense argued that Lake was the mastermind, and Chen was just a follower. That Lake had manipulated him. That he'd been afraid to resist. The prosecution countered with evidence showing Chen's active participation. Witnesses who'd seen Chen disposing of bodies. Chen's fingerprints on weapons used in the murders. Chen's voice on the videotapes, taunting victims. Evidence that Chen had suggested some of the targets. That he'd participated enthusiastically in the torture. That he'd killed at least 3 victims personally. In 1999, Marcus Chen was convicted of 11 counts of murder. He was sentenced to death. He's currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison. Still appealing. Still alive. As of 2025, the victims' families have been waiting for justice for 40 years. The property in Wilseyville was eventually sold. The new owners demolished the cabin and the cinder block bunker. They wanted no trace of the horror that had occurred there. But you can still find the location. It's marked on true crime websites and maps. Coordinates posted in forums. People visit, taking photos, leaving flowers. Some come out of respect for the victims. Others come for darker reasons. Curiosity, morbid fascination. The thrill of standing where evil occurred. The forest has reclaimed most of it. Trees have grown over the graves. Brush has covered the foundations. But the memory remains. This case is particularly disturbing because of the premeditation. Lake didn't just snap one day. He spent years planning, years building, years preparing to commit these crimes. The bunker wasn't built in a moment of rage. It was constructed carefully, methodically, over months or years. Every detail was considered. The soundproofing, the restraints, the camera placement, the location of the graves. He even dug practice graves to determine the best depth, the best soil composition, the best way to hide them. He built a machine for murder, and the bunker itself was part of the horror. Not just a location where crimes occurred, but a tool specifically designed for torture and captivity. The victims knew they were in a place built to hold them, that every aspect of their prison had been carefully planned, that someone had spent months creating this space with them in mind, even before they'd been captured. That psychological weight, the knowledge that you're in a purpose-built torture chamber, is almost as horrific as the physical abuse. One of the surviving investigators, now retired, gave an interview in 2015. Detective James Morrison. He'd been one of the first officers to enter the bunker. He said, "I've worked homicides for 30 years. I've seen everything, but this case still haunts me. Not just because of what they did, but because of how much thought went into it. Lake built that bunker like someone else would build a workshop. He was proud of it. You could see it in the videos. He was showing it off, explaining the features like he was giving a tour of his dream home. And that's what keeps me up at night, the fact that someone could be that night, thought it." Morrison retired in 2010, but he says he still dreams about the bunker, about the victims, about the videotapes. The case has been featured in numerous documentaries and books. The Collector Killer, Operation Miranda, D for Me, the terrifying story of the Lake murders. But the families of the victims say the media attention doesn't help. It doesn't bring their loved ones back. It doesn't ease the pain. Sharon Solito, the sister of victim Lonnie Bond, said in an interview, "People are fascinated by the horror. They want to know the details. They watch the documentaries. They read the books. They visit the property. But they forget these were real people. My brother was real. His son was real. They had lives, dreams, and they were taken and thrown away like garbage. That bunker, that evil place, is gone now. Demolished, buried. But it's not gone from my memory. I still see it. I still see my brother's name on that list of victims. And I know he died in that place. Alone. Dared. And no one could hear him scream." The families formed a support group in the late 1980s. They meet annually to remember the victims, to support each other, to advocate for victims' rights. Because in the midst of the media frenzy, the victims' humanity was sometimes lost. They became names on a list, photos in a news report, evidence in a trial. But they were people. Lonnie Bond was a father who loved his son. Brenda O'Connor was an artist. Kathleen Allen was studying to be a nurse. Harvey Dubs owned a video production company. They had futures, dreams, lives that were stolen. The cinder block bunker is gone, demolished and buried. The concrete crushed, the metal melted down. Nothing physical remains. But the horror it represents is permanent. A reminder that the most terrifying monsters are human. That evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it prepares quietly, methodically, building its traps in secret, and waiting. The bunker was designed to be invisible, hidden in the forest, disguised as a storage shed, so victims wouldn't see it coming, and the outside world wouldn't know it existed. Lake's plan was almost perfect. If Chen hadn't been caught shoplifting, if Lake hadn't taken the cyanide pill, the crimes might have continued for years, decades. How many more victims would there have been? We'll never know. But the case remains a warning. That Cold War paranoia about the apocalypse created not just physical structures, but a mindset, a belief that the rules of society were about to break down. That preparation for the end justified any action. Lake believed the world was ending, so he built his own ending for 11 people and sealed it in concrete. The Tomb of the Unknown. Grant County, Washington, October 8, 2014. A hunter is walking through scrubland near Moses Lake when he notices something unusual. A metal grate, partially hidden in tall grass. The grate is rusted, old, covered in decades of dirt and oxidation. He wouldn't have seen it if he hadn't nearly stepped on it. Curious, he kneels down and pulls away some of the grass. The grate is about 2 feet by 2 feet. Square, heavy steel. It's a vent, leading down into the ground. He shines his flashlight through the grate. The beam cuts through the darkness below, illuminating a vertical shaft. Metal, maybe 3 feet wide, perfectly circular. The light doesn't reach the bottom. It just disappears into blackness. He drops a pebble through the grate, listens carefully. 1 second passes, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Finally, he hears it hit, faint, distant, like dropping a stone into a well. He estimates the shaft is at least 60 or 70 feet deep, maybe more. His curiosity intensifies. What is this thing? Why is it here in the middle of nowhere? He tries to lift the grate. It's not locked, just heavy. He pulls it aside with some effort. The grate scrapes against the concrete surrounding the opening, looks down into the shaft. His flashlight beam searches the darkness, and then he sees something that makes his blood run cold. About 20 feet down, wedged in the shaft, is a body. The hunter's first instinct is to look away, but he forces himself to look again, to make sure he's seeing what he thinks he's seeing. It's definitely a body. Human. Vertical. Arms above the head. Stuck. The hunter immediately pulls out his phone and calls 911. His hands are shaking. 911. What's your emergency? I found a body in a vent shaft. Sir, can you confirm you found human remains? Yes. Yes. It's a person. Stuck in a shaft. I think they've been there a while. Stay where you are. We're dispatching units now. Grant County Sheriff's deputies respond within 30 minutes. They bring a technical rescue team from Moses Lake Fire Department. The rescue team assesses the situation. The shaft is too narrow for most people to enter. Too dangerous. The walls are smooth metal. No handholds. If someone goes down and gets stuck, they'll have 2 victims instead of 1. They set up equipment at the top of the shaft. A portable tripod. A pulley system. Heavy-duty ropes. Rescue harnesses. One of the firefighters, a man named David Chen, volunteers to descend. He's the smallest member of the team. 5'6", maybe 140 pounds. The shaft is narrow enough that size matters. Only someone small can fit. Chen is harnessed and attached to the rope system. The team gives him a radio, a flashlight, and medical equipment in case the victim is somehow still alive. Though everyone knows that's unlikely, Chen positions himself over the opening, takes a deep breath, and begins the descent. The team lowers him slowly, carefully. 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet. The shaft is claustrophobic. Chen can barely move his arms. The metal walls are inches from his body on all sides. He keeps his breathing steady, trying not to panic. 20 feet. He reaches the body. The smell hits him immediately. Decomposition. Even though the body is mummified, the dry air in the shaft has preserved it somewhat, but the smell is still there. Chen examines the body carefully. It's a man, or what's left of one. The skin is leathery, dried. The eyes are gone. The hair is matted. The clothing is intact but faded. Jeans, a t-shirt, flannel shirt, no jacket, no shoes. The man is wedged tightly in the shaft. His arms are above his head, like he was trying to reach the surface. His body is completely vertical. Stuck. Chen can see scrape marks on the metal walls, fingernail scratches. The man had been trying to climb, trying to escape, but couldn't. Chen keys his radio. I've got a deceased male. Appears to have been here for an extended period. Mummified. I'm going to need a body bag and additional equipment. The victim is wedged tight. This is going to take some time. Copy that. Stand by. The recovery operation takes hours. Chen has to carefully work the body free from the shaft. It's stuck, compressed by its own weight. The metal walls have held it in place for so long that the body has conformed to the shape of the shaft. Slowly, carefully, Chen manipulates the body, trying not to cause more damage than necessary. The body is evidence. Every detail matters. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of work, Chen manages to get the body into a recovery bag. He signals to the team above. They begin hauling both Chen and the body up. Slowly, the pulley system strains under the weight, but it holds. When they bring Chen and the body to the surface, the medical examiner is already there. Dr. Sarah Martinez. She's been waiting for over an hour. She immediately begins a preliminary examination. Male, Caucasian, approximately 25 to 35 years old based on bone structure and dental wear. Height, approximately 5'9". Decomposition is advanced, but the body is partially mummified due to the dry conditions in the shaft. The level of decomposition suggests he's been in the shaft for at least 6 months, possibly a year or more. Cause of death will require autopsy, but preliminary assessment suggests asphyxiation or dehydration, possibly both. The man got stuck in the shaft and couldn't get out. He died slowly, in the dark, unable to move, unable to escape, alone. But here's the question that haunts everyone at the scene. Who is he? And how did he end up in this shaft? The investigation begins immediately. Sheriff's deputies search the area around the vent shaft. They realize what it is. This is part of an old civil defense air raid siren system, built during the Cold War. In the 1950s and 60s, the United States installed thousands of air raid sirens across the country. The sirens were designed to warn civilians of incoming nuclear attacks. The distinctive wail that meant "take cover." Most sirens were mounted on poles or buildings in towns and cities, but some, particularly in remote areas, were installed underground. The siren would be housed in a concrete bunker below ground. An vent shaft would allow the sound to reach the surface, amplifying it, carrying it for miles across empty land. The system at Moses Lake was one of these underground installations. The siren itself sits in a small concrete chamber about 70 feet below ground. The vent shaft connects the chamber to the surface. The shaft is only 3 feet wide, perfectly circular, smooth metal walls, and it's completely vertical. No ladder, no handholds, just smooth metal. When the system was operational, there had been a ladder, rungs welded to the inside of the shaft for maintenance access. But the system was decommissioned in the early 1980s. The ladder was removed. The entrance was supposed to be sealed, but clearly it wasn't. Investigators need to access the underground chamber to see if there's any evidence down there. They locate the maintenance entrance, concrete structure about 100 yards from the vent shaft. The door is rusted but accessible. Inside is a stairway descending into the earth. The stairs are concrete, cracked. It doesn't bring their loved ones back. It doesn't ease the pain. Sharon Solito, the sister of victim Lonnie Bond, said in an interview, "People are fascinated by the horror. They want to know the details. They watch the documentaries. They read the books. They visit the property. But they forget these were real people. My brother was real. His son was real. They had lives, dreams, and they were taken and thrown away like garbage. That bunker, that evil place, is gone now. Demolished, buried. But it's not gone from my memory. I still see it. I still see my brother's name on that list of victims. And I know he died in that place. Alone. Dared. And no one could hear him scream." The families formed a support group in the late 1980s. They meet annually to remember the victims, to support each other, to advocate for victims' rights. Because in the midst of the media frenzy, the victims' humanity was sometimes lost. They became names on a list, photos in a news report, evidence in a trial. But they were people. Lonnie Bond was a father who loved his son. Brenda O'Connor was an artist. Kathleen Allen was studying to be a nurse. Harvey Dubbs owned a video production company. They had futures, dreams, lives that were stolen. The cinder block bunker is gone, demolished and buried. The concrete crushed. The metal melted down. Nothing physical remains. But the horror it represents is permanent. A reminder that the most terrifying monsters are human. That evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it prepares quietly, methodically, building its traps in secret and waiting. The bunker was designed to be invisible, hidden in the forest, disguised as a storage shed, so victims wouldn't see it coming, and the outside world wouldn't know it existed. Lake's plan was almost perfect. If Chen hadn't been caught shoplifting, if Lake hadn't taken the cyanide pill, the crimes might have continued for years, decades. How many more victims would there have been? We'll never know. But the case remains a warning. That Cold War paranoia about the apocalypse created not just physical structures, but a mindset, a belief that the rules of society were about to break down. That preparation for the end justified any action. Lake believed the world was ending, so he built his own ending for 11 people and sealed it in concrete. Some have partially collapsed, but they're navigable. The team descends carefully, 30 feet down. The stairway opens into a tunnel, maybe 5 feet high and 3 feet wide. The team has to crouch to move through it. The tunnel extends about 50 feet, then opens into the main chamber. The siren chamber. It's a concrete room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. Low ceiling. The siren itself is still there. A massive metal device that looks like a turbine. Rusted now. Silent. Dead. But around the chamber, investigators find evidence that someone had been living here. A sleeping bag. Dirty. Worn. Some food wrappers. Candy bar wrappers. Chip bags. Empty water bottles. A backpack. The investigators carefully collect everything. In the backpack, they find identification. A wallet. Inside is a driver's license. Joshua Ramirez, 28 years old. Last known address, Spokane, Washington. But the address is for a homeless shelter. The sheriff's department runs Joshua's name. He'd been reported missing by a shelter worker 7 months earlier. But the report hadn't generated much attention. Joshua was transient. No permanent address. No family. No regular employment. He moved around. The shelter worker had filed the report more out of procedure than expectation. She'd hoped he'd turn up somewhere. Eventually, he had. Dead. In a vent shaft. The investigation pieces together what happened. Joshua had been homeless for several years, struggling with mental health issues and substance abuse. He'd been in and out of shelters across eastern Washington. At some point, probably 6 to 8 months before his body was found, Joshua had discovered the underground siren chamber. Maybe he'd heard about it from other homeless people. Maybe he'd stumbled across it by accident. These places are known in the homeless community. Dry, protected from weather, hidden from police. Joshua had been using the chamber as a shelter. The evidence showed he'd been there for some time, possibly weeks. The sleeping bag had been used extensively. There were multiple layers of trash. He'd been coming and going, using the maintenance entrance. But at some point, something changed. The maintenance entrance may have partially collapsed. The stairs were already damaged. If a section collapsed while Joshua was inside, it could have blocked his exit. Or maybe Joshua was disoriented. Drugs, or alcohol, or mental illness affecting his judgment. Or maybe he was just curious about the vent shaft, wondered where it led. Whatever the reason, Joshua decided to exit through the vent shaft instead of the maintenance entrance. The vent shaft had a ladder at one point. The mounting brackets are still visible on the walls. But the ladder had been removed decades ago when the system was decommissioned. Joshua tried to climb the shaft anyway. The walls are smooth metal. Very few handholds. But there's a technique called chimney climbing. You brace your back against one wall and your feet against the opposite wall. Then you inch your way up. It's a rock climbing technique, used in narrow vertical passages. But it's exhausting, requires tremendous core and leg strength, and the shaft is 70 feet deep. Joshua made it about 20 feet up, maybe a third of the way. He was probably motivated by the light he could see above, the square of daylight at the top of the shaft. Freedom. So close. But chimney climbing requires constant tension. You have to keep pushing against both walls simultaneously. If you relax, you slip. If your strength gives out, you fall. At some point, Joshua's strength gave out. His muscles failed. He slipped, and as he fell, his body became wedged in the shaft. The shaft narrows slightly as it descends, and Joshua's body, compressed by the fall, wedged into a narrower section. His arms above his head, his body vertical. Stuck. He couldn't move up. The shaft was too narrow to get leverage. He couldn't move down. His body was compressed and stuck. He was trapped, 20 feet below the surface. He tried to scream for help. The scrape marks on the walls show he kept trying to move, trying to free himself. But the vent is in the middle of nowhere, miles from any road. No houses within earshot. No one could hear him. He screamed into the void, and the void didn't answer. The medical examiner's autopsy revealed the full horror. Joshua had survived for an extended period in the shaft. At least 2 days, possibly 3. The autopsy showed evidence of extreme physical and psychological stress. Stress fractures in both arms from repeatedly trying to push against the walls. Torn fingernails from clawing at the metal. All 10 fingernails had been torn away, the fingertips worn down to bone. Severe dehydration. His organs showed signs of progressive system failure. His throat was damaged from screaming. Vocal cords shredded. He'd screamed himself raw. Eventually, his body simply shut down. Dehydration, exhaustion, asphyxiation, as his diaphragm could no longer function properly in the compressed position. He died slowly, in the dark, unable to move, knowing he was going to die, and unable to do anything about it. This case is one of dozens, maybe hundreds. Across the United States, there are thousands of abandoned Cold War structures, missile silos, bunkers, radar stations, communication facilities, siren systems, command centers. Most are decommissioned and abandoned. Many are hidden, unmarked, slowly decaying, and dangerous, and people keep finding them. Urban explorers looking for adventure, homeless people looking for shelter, curious teenagers, photographers, history enthusiasts, and sometimes they don't come back out. In 2009, a man in Arizona fell into a vent shaft similar to the one that killed Joshua. He survived, but only because a hiker heard him screaming after 12 hours. In 2011, a teenager in South Dakota got trapped in a collapsed bunker. He was found 3 days later, dead from dehydration and hypothermia. In 2016, a woman in Montana entered an abandoned radar station and fell through a rusted floor grate into a lower level. She broke both legs. She was trapped for 5 days before someone found her. She survived, but lost her left leg to infection. In 2019, 2 urban explorers entered a decommissioned missile silo in Kansas. One of them fell 60 feet when a catwalk collapsed. He died instantly. His friend climbed out and called for help, but the body wasn't recovered for 3 days due to the dangerous conditions. These structures are monuments to the Cold War, built to survive the apocalypse. But now they're apocalypses in miniature. Traps, tombs, waiting for the unwary. After Joshua's death, the Grant County Sheriff's Department made an effort to secure the site. They welded a new heavy steel grate over the vent shaft. They installed warning signs around the perimeter. Danger, deep shaft, stay away, no trespassing, county property. They tried to seal the maintenance entrance by filling it with rubble. But within a year, someone had cut through the welds on the grate. The grate was moved aside. The warning signs were stolen or vandalized, and people were going down there again. The appeal of these places is powerful. They're mysterious, hidden. They represent a piece of history, a window into Cold War paranoia. Urban explorers document them, post photos online, share, coordinate, treat them like tourist attractions. But that history is dangerous. The structures are old, decaying, unsafe. Joshua Ramirez was buried in a county cemetery in Moses Lake. His grave is marked with a simple headstone. Joshua Ramirez, 1986 to 2014. Gone but not forgotten. There was no funeral service, no family to mourn him, just a few shelter workers who'd known him, and the sheriff's deputies who recovered his body. One of those deputies, a woman named Lisa Torres, gave an interview to a local newspaper after the recovery. She said, "The worst part wasn't finding him. The worst part was imagining what his last days were like. Stuck in that shaft, in the dark, screaming for help that never came, knowing he was going to die and there was nothing he could do about it. He could probably see daylight above him, so close, but he couldn't reach it. That's a horror I wouldn't wish on anyone." There's something uniquely terrifying about dying in a confined space. The claustrophobia, the helplessness, the complete loss of control, and the isolation, the knowledge that you're alone, that no one knows where you are, that no one is coming. And Joshua's case has that additional element of tragic proximity. He was only 20 feet from the surface. 20 feet. On a ladder, that's maybe 15 seconds of climbing. But without a ladder, in a smooth metal shaft, it might as well have been 20 miles. He could see daylight, could see the sky through the grate, could probably hear birds, wind in the grass, normal sounds of life, but he couldn't reach it. That proximity to freedom makes the tragedy even more heartbreaking. And Joshua is not alone. There are others. Bodies that have been found in similar circumstances. And bodies that haven't been found yet. In 2018, a spelunker exploring Cold War bunkers in Nevada found human remains in a flooded equipment room. The remains were so degraded that identification was impossible. The person had been there for at least a decade, possibly longer. In 2020, construction workers demolishing an old radar station in Wyoming found a skeleton in a sealed room. The person had apparently gotten locked in at some point. No one knew they were there. The room had been sealed from the outside, probably accidentally. The person inside would have had no way out. They likely died within days from dehydration, alone in the dark. In 2022, hikers in Idaho found a body in an abandoned missile silo. The person had fallen from a catwalk. The body had been there for at least 2 years. Never reported, never missed. These Cold War structures were built to protect us, to shelter us from the apocalypse, to preserve civilization in the face of nuclear annihilation. But they've become tombs, not for the millions who would have died in a nuclear war, but for the dozens, maybe hundreds, who've wandered in and never come out. And the tragedy is that most of these deaths are preventable. The structures could be properly sealed, or demolished, or at least marked with adequate warnings. But there are too many of them, scattered across too much land. Thousands of sites, most on federal land that's not regularly patrolled. And demolishing them is expensive. These structures were built to survive nuclear blasts. They don't come down easily. It costs millions of dollars to properly demolish a single missile silo. Most don't have that kind of funding. So they remain, waiting, silent, dark, and deep. Joshua's death prompted some local media coverage. A few articles in Washington newspapers. A segment on the evening news. But the story faded quickly. Just another tragic accident. Another homeless person who died alone. But his death is part of a larger pattern. A ton of deaths in places built to preserve life. Cold War structures claiming victims decades after the Cold War ended. The irony is cruel. We built these places to save us from the end of the world. But they're ending individual worlds, one at a time, quietly, in the dark. The Cold War is over. The Soviet Union collapsed. The Berlin Wall fell. The fear of nuclear annihilation faded into history. But the infrastructure remains. Across America and Europe, thousands of bunkers, silos, and shelters still sit buried beneath fields, forests, and hillsides. Concrete relics of a time when humanity prepared for the end of the world. They were built to save us, to shield civilization from atomic fire, to preserve life after the unthinkable. But history had other plans. In the decades since, these structures have been repurposed in ways no one anticipated. Some became underground homes. Some became museums. Some became data centers for the digital age. And some became something far darker. Tonight, we walked through 7 of those stories. From private doomsday fortresses and abandoned Titan silos, to digital empires, prison gardens, and concrete cells of unimaginable cruelty. Each case is different, but they share a single truth. The architecture of fear became the infrastructure of horror. Walls designed to block radiation also block screams. Doors built to seal against nuclear blasts also seal against escape. Systems meant to protect life can just as easily hide death. The same features meant to save humanity can be turned into tools of isolation, imprisonment, and silence. The bunkers are still out there. Most are sealed. Most are abandoned. But abandoned does not mean empty. The next time you pass a strange concrete structure in an empty field, ask yourself what it was built for and what it might be hiding now. The Cold War taught us to fear what could fall from the sky. But perhaps the real danger has always been what was buried underground. If this descent into hidden places opened your eyes, do not surface just yet. Subscribe to Plain Sight Docs and hit the notification bell so you never miss what gets uncovered next. Every week, we go deeper into the cases that were buried, the victims who were forgotten, and the crimes meant to stay hidden. Until next time, stay curious and watch where you step.